You are listening to provetext, a Glossa House podcast exploring Scripture and all things related to it. New episodes are released daily. For more information, check out glossahouse.com and subscribe to our channels on Spotify and YouTube. Welcome and enjoy.
Hello and welcome to provetext and Glossa House TV. I am Michael Halcomb, and today I got a little bit of a scratchy throat, a sore throat. The season's changing, so bear with me here. But I'm glad to be with Dr. Andy Naselli. And man, looking at your website, Dr. Naselli, can I call you Andy for the
Sure.
All right, good. Andy, looking at your website, I mean, it's just really impressive. Do you have 2 doctorates?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you're a little bit on the same wavelength as me, I guess. I did 5 degrees and was in school for more years in higher ed than I was K through 12.
Wow.
So I assume it's probably similar to you. You might have me beat in the years in higher ed department there, but yeah, so let me say a little bit about you, and then you can tell us a little bit about yourself. I'm looking at andynaselli.com here, and you are the professor of systematic theology and New Testament at Bethlehem College and Seminary in Minneapolis. And as you mentioned to me just before I hit record, you're planting a church, Christ the King Church in Stillwater. So let's talk about Bethlehem, and then let's talk about church planting, and then we'll jump into some of your books and whatnot. So tell me about what you have going on there at Bethlehem.
Yeah, Bethlehem College and Seminary is a small school, 200 or so students in college and seminary level. And I think this is my 12th year teaching there.
Wow.
Yeah, something like that. And I've really enjoyed it. I teach mostly in the seminary, and I've now moved over to teaching all of our systematic theology courses and ethics. And then we have an evening Master of Arts program. I teach 3 systematic theology courses there. And it's a delight. My focus is training pastors and pastor qualified men to serve in the church and in schools. And I love it. And part of my heart for training pastors is also doing pastoring. I've been a pastor for the last 9 years. It was of Bethlehem Baptist Church, and then the North Church, which we were one church, 3 campuses, and we became 3 churches. And I was part of the North Campus, which became the North Church. And now out of that church, I'm going to plant, God willing, in January, a church in the Stillwater, Minnesota area. It's right on the border near Wisconsin. And looking forward to that. We're just closing on a home, God willing, in a few weeks, trying to sell our home now. It's a busy season.
Yeah, wow. Well, it sounds like you have a pretty full teaching load, and I mean you're writing all the time too. You have quite a few books here. I'll just for the people who are listening, check out andynaselli.com, obviously, but lots of publications here. Introducing the New Testament, a short guide, Let Go and Let God.
Put the question mark. Don't forget the question mark.
Yeah, let go and let God. There you go. Perfect. That's very important there. Thank you. The spectrum of evangelicalism, from typology to doxology. You've contributed to the NIV's Zondervan Study Bible. Perspectives on the extent of the atonement. I mean, the list is just going on. Conscience. How to understand and apply the New Testament. No quick fix. Little voice in your head, 3 views on Israel and the church. Keeps going. 40 questions about biblical theology. I love this title. How can I love church members with different politics? I think we should talk about that. That's a 2020 book there. The Serpent. And I want to skip ahead a little bit here. You do have a new book on learning to read or something to that effect. I can't give me the how to read a book, advice for Christian readers. There it is. Yeah, I skimmed over it accidentally. So I want to talk about that one too. But what is your? I like to ask people who are prolific writers like you. And I mean, I'm trying to write all the time. Do you have a regular routine? Are you up on certain days of the week at certain times, or are you one of these writers that you just write when you find the time?
I go in bursts. So my life is very disciplined and organized, and mostly that's reading. So I'm a very full man because I read a lot. And then
Hmm.
the writing comes out in bursts where I read systematically and I'm able to work that all together and crystallize it into articles and books. And it's related to my lecturing and my preaching. I tell people I have 4 or 5 main activities I do. I research, I write, I teach, I shepherd, and I preach. And
Hmm.
all of them help me get better at the other 4 if I'm doing one of them. So
Hmm.
researching and teaching helps me get better at writing, for example. So I don't, like have a 2-hour block every day where I just write, but my whole life is kind of geared towards writing because of my vocation as a research
Hmm.
professor.
I was interviewing the New Testament scholar Con Campbell. I don't know if
Yeah,
you're familiar with
I
his
know.
name. Yeah. I was interviewing him a while back on here, and he was telling me he does have this like kind of schedule where he wakes up at like 4 in the morning and writes for 2 or 3 hours to start his day. And I've never been able to follow that sort of regiment. Like I'm kind of more like it comes in bursts or spurts or whatever, inspirational hit after a bit, or I see a need, for a resource to be created, and so I'll start working on a project, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I'm always interested in that. When people are writing and how.
So, like
Yeah.
when I wrote my book on predestination, I wrote that in the first 3 months of 2022 on a research sabbatical. I knew that was coming. So for months and months and months, I'm
Right.
reading, I'm teaching on it, I'm thinking about it, and then when I get a block of time to write, it just all comes out fast. But it's been stewing. It's been in a crock pot.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that. And so you mentioned that you're reading sort of widely. I love how you describe that very full man. From reading widely, and so you have all this like cross pollination, I assume, right? That's going on.
Yeah, there's a famous quote by a guy named Francis Bacon. So that's where I was getting at. He said, "Reading makes a full man, conference or conversation a ready man, writing an exact man." And it says
Hmm.
if a man write little, he had need have a great memory. If he engage in conversation little, he had need have a present wit. And if he read little, he had need have much cunning to seem to know what he doesn't know. So they all go together. And to be a good writer, you got to be a deep reader.
Right. Yeah, I teach writing here at the college I'm at, and it's one of the first things I tell all the students. You want to be a better writer, you need to be a better reader.
That's right.
They go hand in hand. You want to be a good writer, read good writing, not just be a better reader, but read good writing. That whole like it's not practice makes perfect, right? It's perfect practice makes perfect, or good reading makes good writing, that sort of thing. Good reading makes the good writer. But yeah, I mean, it's impressive, and congratulations on all your works here. You have the book I said I wanted to talk a little bit about. Now, I'm saying this aware that YouTube has been flagging me endlessly during this season we're in with candidates, and I has this political season. I hesitate to even use words like that, because if you use the E word or politics, they'll flag me for promoting like yeah, a candidate or something like that. It's really frustrating. But we should go ahead, and I've had to have numerous phone calls with them over that, and it's eaten away at a lot of time just to
Hmm.
get these barriers removed. But yeah, how can I love church members with different politics? I'm curious. I haven't had the chance to read that book, but that was written in 2020. So
I updated
for
it. I
you've
updated it.
updated it.
So on September 9th, 2024, so just a week or two ago, it came out on christoverall.com under the
Okay.
title. So the new title is Politics, Conscience, and the Church: The Why, What, and How of Political Disagreement. So 4 years later, I think I've matured and strengthened my views of
Hmm.
politics. And this is an updated version of that.
Wow. How extensive of an update is it? I mean, complete overhaul or
It's tweaks.
uh,
So, for example, I think I speak about justice more precisely as getting what you deserve and giving others what they deserve. I've just refined that definition. And then in the article, I compare and contrast how I thought about voting for or not for Donald Trump in 2016, 2020, and now 2024. And my weighing of reasons to do that or not do that have changed. And I think that's because I've become more precise in how I think about political reality. Yeah.
That's interesting. I've I've become increasingly uncomfortable with. I mean, he's always had a left lean, right? But the left lean for him in particular is getting harder and harder. And I don't know if that's just a ploy to sort of try to capture people in the middle, or if it's just like the true colors that maybe have been there all along are coming out. I mean, certainly the things that he is promulgating, don't fit within an evangelical theology comfortably at all. I mean, like the stuff on gay marriage, for example, same-sex marriage. Now perhaps stances on abortion and various other gender identity and whatnot. So I'm curious about what can you give some particulars of what has changed for you, or like what's been shifting in your paradigm, I guess.
The main thing is that in 2016 and 2020, I was hesitant to say that given the Democratic Party's platform, I don't think voting for a Democratic candidate at the level of president, governor, Congress is a faithful option for a Christian. Because I grew up, I'm 44 now, and all growing up, it was, Christians can disagree on this. There may be good reasons for strategically choosing to vote Democrat. I just heard that over and over and over. And you have to ask the question, at what point does it need to what's the line? Like, how bad does it have to
Right.
get before you say you shouldn't do that? And I'm now ready to say publicly, I don't think voting for a Democratic candidate is a faithful option for a Christian now in 2024, given their platform, given what they said they'll do, given what they're standing for. It's not just abortion, though it is that. It's
Yeah.
the whole anti-God view of sexuality, the whole LGBT movement, not to mention their economic policies. And so I say there are three options, at least for Christians: vote for a Republican candidate, vote for a third-party candidate, or don't vote. So I think those are three viable options,
Yeah.
meaning those would be non-sinful choices. But even then, I think there's a best among those three. I think personally, this again, we can agree to disagree, but personally, I think that if you vote for third party, you're wasting your vote, at least in some states in
Right.
America. And then if you don't vote, I think that's irresponsible. So I do think that the best decision right now is to vote Republican, though I recognize it's not like an evil party and a righteous party. It's
Yeah.
a really evil party and an evil party, and none of them. We're choosing between what is the least bad option here, given our options. So that's
Yeah.
how I've calculated it.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting that whole lesser of two evils kind of question has always been floating. There've been years where, I haven't voted. Here's something interesting. Me and my wife were both theological conservatives, Orthodox believers. We have never voted the same in 22 years of marriage.
Weird.
Yeah, we've never voted the same, and sometimes there have been years where I voted and she hasn't. She's abstained, or she's voted and I've abstained, and so it isn't always like we've been voting opposite party,
Mm-hmm.
but we've just never voted the same. This might be the first election where we do, um, but yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting the whole lesser of two evils thing. That's a whole moral conundrum in and
Mm-hmm.
of itself. Uh, you know, it, if you're just going for the lesser of two evils, is it okay to participate in any evil? You know, that's
Yeah,
where the
I don't have time to unpack this now, but I would
yeah, yeah,
recommend ChristOverall.com today.
sure,
So we're recording this on September 16th. Has an article by Michael Carlino called "How Should We Then Vote?" the Christian Conscience in the 2024 presidential election. It
Awesome.
basically expands on my conclusion in my article. I highly recommend it. So check it
Yeah,
out.
we'll check it out. Yeah,
Yeah.
if you're watching or listening to the podcast here, go check that out. I'm gonna do that. Um, she got this new book out too, and it's called How to Read a Book: Advice for Christian Readers. So why this? Where's this come from?
From years of teaching, when I assign uh, reading requirements for my classes, I give students 3 levels of reading. So I'll say, Micah read this, Macca read this, and spend X number of minutes surveying this. So
Mm,
3 levels. And initially, students are confused because they have one speed. It's like they ride a one-speed bicycle. That's the only speed they know. They didn't know they could change gears. And so I train them. No, there are actually different speeds of reading, and there are good reasons to employ them at different times. And
mm,
actually, we already do this to some degree. Like if you're trying to decide whether to buy a book on Amazon and you use the look inside feature, or whether to buy a book at Barnes and Noble and you browse it, you already have a sense of what it means to survey a book, where you get a sense of what's its argument. Is this a book I want to spend more time with? And macro reading, that just means you're reading every word, but you're clipping along. It's like listening to an audiobook while you're driving. You can't stop and highlight it. You're getting every word, but you're going, you may be on 2 speed. And micro reading is the slowest, most thorough, get the most out of the book that you can type of reading, which is the one kind of reading most people think is the only kind of reading.
right.
And then people get guilted into thinking if I start reading a book, I have to micro read the whole thing or else I'm a bad person. And that's just it's a joy to tell people you can take that out of your conscience. That's not something God says you have to do. You don't have to finish every book you read. Most books are probably not worth your time.
Mm. That's interesting too. I have my students, so I teach 3 sections on writing this semester. I teach freshman writing courses as well. And I have them watching some videos, and they got to take notes on these videos outside of class. And then they bring their notes to class and we discuss. But it's interesting because, like, some students have to ask, can I use the YouTube feature of speeding the video up, to 1.5, for example? And like, sure, on this guy talks slow, you can speed that up for sure. But I think with watching videos that are already, students by and large are already doing this kind of thing too. Um, and so yeah, it's interesting, the idea of switching gears. What's been the reception among your students?
I'd say 90 to 95% of them love the concept of different types of reading, and they latch onto it, and they just flourish. There's usually a small number who just they're not wired to do it. And I don't think they're bad people or they're lazy or anything like that. I think there's a small number of people who are not wired to do it. An example is the chancellor of my school, John Piper. He has tried and tried different speeds, and basically he can read at the speed that he can talk or listen to people, and that's it. And he's a very good reader. He's a thorough reader, and he's a slow reader, which means he's very careful about reading the best stuff, and he
Mm,
just has to pass on most stuff. I'm a research professor, so I'm processing lots of resources. I'm a book review editor. I'm processing 5 to 10 books a day of new books. I cannot micro read every book. So
right.
yeah.
I find that when I'm reading someone like C.S. Lewis, I'm forced. I'm forced to slow down. Like, I don't, and do the sort of micro reading. I don't know if I necessarily have a choice. Whereas if I'm, reading a modern article or something like that, or a blog post, I can go faster. Yeah, I like this idea of switching gears, um, and freeing up students to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's great. What other tips have you come away with for readers? And I'm assuming this is particularly at the
Yeah.
college level.
So I
Yeah.
wrote this book so it could be an introduction to reading at the upper high school level for classical Christian uh, high schools, and for college students, and even for master's students. So I'm using it in my classes in the seminary level, and my daughter's using it in her Logos online school out of Moscow online. And so I wrote it accessibly, but it's not thin soup or anything. So basically, I have 4 chapters, so I'm asking 4 questions: why, how, what, and when should you read? So I just make the case that's really important to do it. I give 3 reasons you should do it, and then I explain how. That's the most nuts and bolts chapter, or that's where I explain levels of reading among other strategies. And then the what is me recommending the types of literature to read, and then the when is practical tips on how to do this.
Hmm. So what's the relationship between uh Bethlehem and New St. Andrews? Is there a relationship there or no? It's like I'm seeing like some cross pollination between people at your institution and then what's going on over there. And I'm just curious because I'm a little out of the loop.
Yeah. So just friends, just like you have. There's no formal connection, but there are people who teach there, people who teach at our place, who are friends with each other, and we both are committed to reading the great books in our college curriculum and obeying God joyfully. So there's some similarities there, and there. So our former president Joe Rigney, who was on faculty here for
I
15 years
just
ago.
interviewed him on here a few weeks ago.
Okay,
Yeah.
so he was here for a long time, and now he's on faculty at New St. Andrews. So that might be some of the connections you're seeing.
Okay, yeah. Um, I've interviewed him and then Jared Longshore, and then I interviewed the CEO last week of Canon Press.
Brian Cole,
Yeah, Brian Cole. I just talked to him a few days ago.
he's great.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see those connections.
Yeah, my book,
There.
How to Read a Book, is published by Canon Press. So Brian Cole
Right,
oversaw that.
right. So interesting. You have forthcoming God's Will and Making Decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Exegetical fallacies. So this says it's a third edition. Were you part of that initially, that initial volume, or
No,
no?
so D.A. Carson wrote the initial exegetical fallacies in 1984. Second edition was 1996. And he's getting older now and slowing down, still sharp. And he asked me to update the third edition. So I'm making all the changes. I'm expanding it by maybe 20, 25%, and rephrasing things, trying to make the headings clearer. So that should come out probably by summer 2026, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that's great. And then you got a book on First Timothy, tracing the argument of First Timothy, a phrase diagram. What's a
That's
phrase?
forthcoming. Yeah, a
Yeah,
phrase
right.
diagram is. Imagine if you take a sentence like, "I went to Chipotle because I was hungry." So I went to Chipotle would be on one line, and
Yep.
then because I was hungry would be on the second line, indented, and you
Yeah.
can label it. So this is the reason for line 1. So
Gotcha.
it's a way of basically taking clauses and showing how they relate to each other. And for
Gotcha.
Some of Paul's sentences, they're very complex, and it's
Yes.
helpful to break them down and see, okay, this is the main idea. These are the supporting clauses. These are reasons. These are means. These are concessions. These are conditions. That kind of thing.
Yeah, clausing and phrasing. I'm trying to think of the guy. He had a big old fat book on First John. I can't think of his name. He's I think one of the early guys to be doing that clausing and phrasing. Name is slipping my mind. Used to teach in Michigan, Grace or something like that. Um, anyways, yeah. So that's cool. You got several projects coming up. Co-authored stuff, also just stuff by yourself. How many classes you teach in a semester?
It depends. So I'm usually teaching 3 or 4. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then I
Gotcha.
teach adjunct to other schools. So I teach at the Master's Seminary in Southern
Oh
California,
yeah.
where
All
MacArthur
right.
is, and
Yeah.
Faith Bible Seminary in Lafayette, Indiana. I just taught this summer Indianapolis Theological Seminary. So I enjoy teaching block courses other places.
Yeah. And then you mentioned that you're planting a church.
Hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about that. How long's that been going on, and what stage are you in? What's that look like?
Yeah. So maybe 2018, my good friend Tom Dodds and his wife Abigail asked me if I would consider planting a church with them, and I said no way. I was a pastor of Bethlehem. There's full life. I didn't have a desire for that. But since then, my desire to preach regularly to my own church members has grown. I preach maybe 15, 20 Sundays a year. Most of those have been to other churches, maybe 4 to 8 to my own. And that desire has just gotten stronger and stronger. I would love to shepherd a flock as the lead preacher and pastor.
Hmm.
And when you couple that with our dear friends Tom and Abigail and their desire to uh, help form a strong Christian community in the Stillwater area. And then we're dreaming about having a classical Christian school, K to 12, in that area, and they could really use one. Again, we're dreaming big right now. We got the church first,
Yeah.
and then you got to get land and building and all that. But we would love to build an educational structure. And the reason for that, been talking to some others who've been doing this. Here's an example: Ben Merkel. I don't know if you've interviewed him. He's the president of New
Yeah.
St. Andrews. He said in one of his talks that he's found that about half their students are homeschooled, half of them are Christian school. And he says the difference between them is homeschoolers tend to be stronger on literature, and Christian schoolers tend to be stronger on science and math. But then it all kind of pans out when they're together. But he says one noticeable difference is that when people come from a community of mostly homeschoolers, they're not as thick. But when they come from a community where there's a one vibrant Christian school, that's it's the hub around which most of the activity of the families takes place that unites that community. And I just been
Mm,
thinking about that. I don't think we have to have a Christian school to be faithful community, but people, especially when they have children in the K to 12 years,
yeah.
their rhythms and routines revolve to some degree around what their kids are doing, and it brings people together. So that is a compelling reason to me to do something more organized, whether it's a 3 day a week school or something like that.
Yeah.
So I'm dreaming right now. Yeah.
Right on. We have a book coming out maybe in 3 or 4 days. It's from Colton Moore and Ben House. They teamed up, and it's called Beyond the Horizon, The Argument for Classical Christian Education, or something like that. A nice little book. Maybe you guys pick up a copy of that as you're dreaming and praying and planning. Um, so you're on board, and are you guys meeting regularly as a new plant yet, or?
We got three other guys who are planning to be pastors together, so four total. And one of them is full time. I'm part time. He's one of my former students. I taught him 6 courses. His name is Nathan Colstock. Super guy. And those four families is 25 something people. So that's a good start. And then we're growing in other families who are committing to come, and we're meeting with them monthly, and we're corresponding with them. So we're building a team, and we plan to covenant together as a church in early January and begin our weekly Sunday morning worship services in January. We don't have a
Excellent.
we don't have a building. We don't have a hope to get a bank account this week. So we need help. We need prayer. We need the Lord's smiling providence on us.
Wow. Um, do you happen to know Jesse Schumann? Were you
Oh yeah,
around
former student.
Bethlehem?
He
Yeah,
was. He's gone on to do well at teaching Hebrew in an immersive way.
that's right. I work a lot with him. He and I are good friends. He's got two books coming out with us in the next week.
Wow.
Two Hebrew books, lots of videos, and they're sort of Hebrew story books. So yeah, we do a lot with Jesse and his wife Marissa, and they continue to just create just great resources.
Wow.
So that's funny. Just also the sort of connections between you and I, knowing some similar people. So that's kind of cool. Um, yeah, well, fascinating. So you're teaching, you're publishing, you're preaching and church planting, and you have kids of your own. You have family.
God has blessed my wife Jenny and me after 20 years of marriage with daughters ages 16, 13, 12, and 7. Our 16-year-old is a senior in high school and flourishing. She's a delight. They're all a delight. Uh, so I'm very grateful to the Lord for 4 daughters who love us and love the Lord.
Yeah. Will your daughter go to Bethlehem? Will she go? Do you know? Will she go off to college or?
Yeah, she's considering some options. Bethlehem is a college is a strong one, and she loves Shakespeare. She's read just about all of his stuff and watched many versions of his plays. And there's a school in South Carolina that her mom went to for undergrad called Bob Jones University, and
Oh
they
yeah.
have a Shakespeare program that is very attracted to her. She did Shakespeare camp there last summer and loved it. So she's wishing there was something conservative drama training in the Minneapolis area, and
Right.
haven't been able to find that. But we'll see.
Yeah, that's a shame. Just it's got to be so left dominant. It's another there's a guy there, Bob Jones, that we've worked with named Randy Leedy.
And
He's
Randy.
done does Greek diagramming.
Yeah,
We've
yeah,
published some of his stuff as well.
yeah.
So it's kind of cool. Wow, that's neat. So 16, that's a young senior, yeah.
She skipped a grade.
Um, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I have this semester, interestingly, I have several 16-year-old freshmen. Yeah.
Are they doing
Which
that thing where their junior year of high school they take college classes for college credit?
some of them are, but
Yeah.
I think a couple of them have already graduated. Yeah.
Nice.
And just start. I'm sure they'll turn 17 like right away,
Okay.
but um, yeah, some foreign exchange students even. So, uh, yeah, really, really fascinating. So what's it like? I mean, juggling, right? Do you feel like it's a juggling act to be a father, a husband, a pastor, a professor, an author, or does it somehow kind of all just like fit together?
Well, if you take away the pressure of selling a house and buying a house and updating your new house in various ways, you take that piece out, and it's doable. So, this particular season of the next few months is uncomfortably full of pressure to make that happen. But in general, I've been training for this my whole life. Is to
Right.
do it all, and I think the Lord has made me for a time like this, and I'm like Eric Liddell says, I feel God's pleasure when I run. I feel God's pleasure when I do all these things, and with His
Mm,
help. And it's I don't feel like I'm on pace to burn out. I really do pace myself. I mean, I spend usually an hour in the morning doing strength training and or
mm,
running. Like I'm trying to eat healthy, get enough sleep. Usually 8 hours of sleep. I've got a calendar I share with my wife in Google Calendar where you got here's when I'm doing research and writing. Here's what I'm teaching. Here's family time. So it's every day. There's a big block for that. And there's blocks in the weekend for that. So my kids don't know that dads hold off ignoring us. I'm dad to them. So
right.
it's possible to do. Now it doesn't really leave a lot of wiggle room for other hobbies. So my
Right.
hobbies are, fortunately, I love to read stuff that's related to my job and other things. And I love my family. I love my wife. We do a lot together. So it gives you an idea.
Yeah. What's your take on audiobooks?
Well, my wife, for years have subscribed to the highest level of Audible audiobooks, and we've maxed those out every year. Listen to so many of them. I'm listening to them while I'm working out, while I'm driving,
Yeah.
while I'm showering. Sometimes I think about in my book, How to Read a Book. I have a section on audiobooks where I argue it counts as reading, and I give 11 reasons why audiobooks are so great. One of the reasons is that think about this: if you could hire a professional reader
Mm,
to read to you
right.
at any time of the day, at any speed you want, at any volume, wherever you are, for like $20. I mean, think about it. So like Jim Dale reading Harry Potter, how
Right.
he's amazing, or Stephen Fry reading Sherlock Holmes,
Mm,
or he does the British Harry Potter. Those guys they're performing at the level of like Andy Serkis reading The Lord of the Rings is another one. Amazing to be able to listen to that anywhere you go at whatever volume you want, and you can do it in a dark room or when you're doing something else with your hands like mowing or washing dishes. Or what a gift!
right. Right. I got another one for you. Chat GPT.
I have not played along with that much. Our faculty have had some meetings where they've warned us how students could use it for plagiarism and stuff like that. So I'm aware of dangers. I have not played around with it at all much. So I'm sure it does amazing things. It feels a little bit like cheating to me, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that, having been in various institutions, that yeah, I'm having to wrestle with. And students increasingly seem to want to use it. I
Hmm.
don't know that they know how to use it responsibly. Um, I found it helpful in some tasks to is for time efficiency, um, but there are other tasks that I've banned myself on using it
Hmm.
from. Um, So I want to try to stay authentic, like in my sermon writing,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of thing. Um, but yeah, this is a discussion. I'm at two institutions right now where this is a discussion that's happening in both of them,
Hmm.
and it's pretty concerning. Like as an educator, um, yeah, even what I would consider sometimes like the most ethical of students, are having to deal with the temptations of Chat GPT. And uh I just had, in recent times, I'll say, someone uh turn in turn in a sort of report or something, and the punctuation, grammar, spelling, everything nailed it,
Hmm.
right? And I'm like, this is unusual, one, for this individual, right? So there were several dead giveaways, like right from the start, that you could tell. And so I had to get in contact with the student and talk through this. But it's interesting, and it's becoming more and more pervasive,
Hmm.
from what in my experience. Um, so yeah, I'd be curious, if in a few years we get to talk again about another book of yours or something, and see if you've played with it anymore by then. But yeah, what an interesting thing. I mean, some students are trying to make the argument, how is that different than like Microsoft Word spell checking me? Like that kind of thing. And
How is it different to have a computer program write out your paper?
well, so they'll say like this: I wrote the paper and then I put it into ChatGPT and told it to fix my grammar and spelling issues.
Okay,
Uh,
so something like that. If issue by issue you analyze it and think, oh yeah, that was a change, and you understand why, and you make it. That's no different than asking a friend to read it and make suggestions. That's different than having it write it for you.
right, yeah, for sure. So I mean, but that is an interesting, like, and you know what's weird? Like, I found myself in the past aggravated sometimes with having to grade. That's usually not a professor's, favorite thing, is to grade papers. Although you can find a lot of joy in it here and there. But I've found myself, in those instances, like I'd rather read the rougher, unpolished, not perfect version.
Hmm.
Like I want to hear you. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to hear the AI, right? I want to hear you and your perspective. So that's been an interesting, like, light bulb kind of moment for me. Um, and yeah, so I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out how to navigate this, and I've loosened up on my marking for spelling and syntax and grammar, and have started to focus more on content, with the hope that, you know, I don't, not that I want students to write, a paper with a bunch of typos or anything, but I'm hoping that they see that if I focus my attention on the content aspects of it, there'll be less of a temptation to feed something into the computer. But
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting conundrum, really. And yeah, so I'm curious how someone like you will navigate this, in the coming years as it becomes more of a force. Yeah, but
Most of my students are seminary level pastors in training, where if they're cheating at that level, there's not much hope for them. So it's kind of an honor system.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I get that. I get that.
Yeah,
I'm with you on that. Nevertheless, right?
yeah.
Nevertheless. So, but man, yeah, I don't know. So we'll see where it goes. I'm glad to hear that about audiobooks, and I try to use every spare moment. I'm very similar in that regard too. I was just driving today, and every moment I'm in the car, like, why waste this time? Like, like, let's have something on. So yeah. Although for me, I've been listening to a lot of like comedy stuff lately, in terms of comedy theory, and it's a
Oh,
big interest of mine, stand up comedy. So yeah, but Well, man, I appreciate you carving out time to meet. I know you're juggling or doing a bunch of things, and it's an extra busy season for you, and so I appreciate it, man. I want to remind people who are watching or listening to head over to andynaselli.com. That's Naselli.com, andynaselli.com. There's all kinds of stuff here on the publications page, audio, video, and whatnot, and a bunch of links to other great resources. And remind us again of the article you mentioned earlier. It wasn't yours, but it was another article. Where can we find that?
That was on christoverall.com by Michael Carlino, and the title is How Shall We Then Vote?
christoverall.com.
Mm-hmm.
How shall we then vote?
Yep.
All right. Well, Andy, man, it's good meeting you, brother, and blessings to you and your family during this time of transition. Blessings to your daughter as she searches for, a school and finishes up school, and blessings to y'all as you plant a church.
Thank you, brother. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And again, if you're watching, listening, head over to glowshouse.com after you've headed over to his website and check out a bunch of the new resources we got there from Jesse Schumann and Colton Moore and a bunch of people we know mutually. So we're going to wrap it up here, friends. We'll stop here and say we hope that helps.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Glossa House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Glossa House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. Glossa House, language resources for the global community.